I trusted my dad to hold onto a rare coin collection I inherited from Grandpa. Years later, I asked for it back. He said, "It's gone." I needed the money. But then I saw a local auction listing, and my grandfather's initials were still etched on the case. I went to that auction, sat in the back row, and watched something happen that gave me an idea. When my grandfather died, it hit me harder than I expected. He was 82, and we all knew his time was coming. Pancreatic cancer doesn't wait around. But even though we had warning, I wasn't ready. He was more than just my grandpa. He was the only real father figure I ever had. My dad was always around physically, but mentally and emotionally, he was somewhere else. Workaholic, distant, judgy, always talking about what I should be doing better. Never listened. Grandpa did. Every time. He lived in Muskogee, in this old 2-story house with creaky floors and a workshop out back where he spent most of his time. He was retired Navy, quiet and careful with his words. Never swore around kids. Always wore suspenders. But he had this one hobby that lit him up like a Christmas tree: coins. I didn't get it at first. As a kid, I thought it was boring. Just old coins in little plastic holders. But he'd sit with me and tell me stories behind each one. Where it came from, why it mattered, how hard it was to find. He had coins from the Civil War era, coins from foreign countries, and a few that were so rare he kept them in a locked glass case in his office. The centerpiece was the 1907 St. Gaudens Double Eagle. If you know coins, you know how rare that is. The thing was gold, heavy, and shined like it had a soul. It was beautiful. He told me once, when I was about 16, "You're the only one who ever asked me about this stuff. The others, your dad, your uncle, they just want to know how much it's worth." I didn't realize how much that stuck with him until he passed. He left me the collection in his will. Everything. The case, the coins, his old appraisal records, even his notes. I was 22 at the time, living in a tiny apartment in Tulsa, working part-time at a gas station and taking online classes. I didn't have a safe place to keep something that valuable. My apartment didn't even have a deadbolt. So my dad offered to keep it in his house. Said he had a safe and it was better protected there. At the time, I didn't question it. He lived in Broken Arrow in a nicer neighborhood, had a full home security system. He seemed genuine when he offered. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I didn't ask for the collection back right away. Life happened. I got a better job. Met someone. Got married. Had a kid. Things got busy. But not once did I forget about those coins. They weren't just collectibles. They were a connection to the only man in my family I ever respected. Fast forward 10 years. I was 32, owned a modest home in Bartlesville with a finished basement and a new Liberty gun safe bolted to the concrete. Finally had the right place to keep the coins safe. So I called my dad. I remember the exact words. "Hey, I think I'm ready to take Grandpa's coin collection home." Got the safe installed and everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Not a normal pause. Something felt off. Then he said, "Yeah, we need to talk about that." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I had to sell them," he said. "Years ago. We were in a tight spot. Bills piled up. I didn't think you'd mind. You never asked about them." I couldn't speak. He kept talking, as if explaining would somehow make it okay. "You weren't doing anything with them. They were just sitting there." I figured. "You figured." I finally snapped. "They weren't yours." "You're being dramatic," he said, voice rising. "I raised you. That collection wouldn't mean a damn thing to you if I hadn't stored it. Don't pretend like you're some victim." I hung up. I couldn't listen to another word. I didn't talk to him for 2 months. Every time I thought about what he did, my hands shook. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just some rare gold coins. This was betrayal. Deep personal betrayal. He'd stolen something my grandfather meant for me. Something irreplaceable. And worst of all, he never planned to tell me. I started spiraling, looking up coin forums, trying to track sales records, auction archives, anything. But rare coins don't always get reported when sold between individuals. Especially not if it's under the table. Then one random Saturday, I was scrolling through a local Facebook group. People post about garage sales, auctions, estate sales. I was just killing time. Then I saw it. A blurry photo of a walnut coin display case. Hand-carved edges. It looked exactly like Grandpa's. I zoomed in on the corner of the photo. There, just barely visible, were 3 carved initials. CRH. Charles Raymond Haskins. My chest went tight. I clicked the link to the auction listing. It was happening the next day. Muskogee. Local community center. One-day auction of rare estate items and collectibles. I didn't tell anyone. Not my wife, not my coworkers. I just went. I drove to Muskogee early and parked a few blocks away. Didn't want anyone getting my license plate just in case. Wore a hoodie, old jeans, ball cap. I looked like any other tired dad trying to kill a Sunday. The community center was mostly empty at first. Folding chairs set up in rows. A few old-timers were chatting near the snack table. The auctioneer was going over some announcements. I spotted the case immediately, set up on a table near the front. It was roped off, but you could walk around and look. I stayed back. My hands were sweating. Then I saw him. A man, maybe in his mid-50s, tall, heavy-set, gray hair in a ponytail, wearing polished boots and a leather jacket. He was talking with a staff member, pointing to the coin case, laughing like it was his prize. I knew instantly that's who bought them. The auction started. I sat in the very back row, taking notes. The coins were sold in batches. The double eagle? It went for $12,000. That was the one that broke me. I'd seen Grandpa polish it every year on his birthday. Now it was being passed around like a poker chip. I didn't bid on anything. I just wrote down item numbers, buyer paddle numbers, and took mental notes. But the moment the man with the ponytail walked out with his boxes, I knew this wasn't over. And it wasn't going to end with a conversation. I followed the man. Not right away. I waited until he loaded the boxes into his truck and drove off. Then I quietly tailed him at a distance. He wasn't in a rush. Took the main roads. Stopped for gas. I kept my head down when I passed him at the pump. He lived on the outskirts of Wagoner in a ranch-style house with a metal fence and a shop in the back. No security cameras that I could see. He backed into the driveway, opened the garage, and brought the boxes inside. I sat in my car down the street and watched. Then I went home. That night, I started digging. His name was Troy Becker. Real estate guy. Owned a small business that flipped houses and rented out trailers. A few online reviews painted him as sketchy. People complained about deposits disappearing and repairs never getting done. I wasn't surprised. A public search of county property records gave me his address, business license, even past court filings. He wasn't new to lawsuits, evictions, fines. A few years ago, he'd been sued for selling a restored classic car that turned out to have a bent frame. Settled out of court. He knew how to play dirty. But so did I. I filed a police report with Tulsa County the next morning. Told them my late grandfather's coin collection had been stolen years ago and was now being sold without my permission. I gave them photos of the case, my grandfather's will, and a printout of the auction listing that clearly showed his initials on the box. They were polite but slow. I didn't wait. I hired a lawyer, not a cheap one. A woman named Claire Marquez out of Owasso. Tough as hell and didn't blink when I told her I wanted to sue both Troy and my father. She got right to work. First thing she did was send a formal demand letter to Troy Becker. He ignored it. Then she filed the civil suit. And that's when my dad finally called me. I hadn't heard his voice in months. Didn't recognize the number. He started yelling the second I picked up. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I didn't answer. "You're suing me? Your own father? Over some damn coins? You think a judge is gonna take your side?" I kept my voice calm. "You stole them." He laughed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Grow up. You're not entitled to anything just because a dead man gave it to you in a letter." "It wasn't just a letter," I said. "It was a legal will. I have the papers, the appraisals, photos, and you admitted to holding them for me." "You're making a mistake," he said. "No. You did," I said, and I hung up. We subpoenaed the auction house next. They were reluctant, but once Claire threatened them with being dragged into the lawsuit, they complied. They gave us copies of the consignment documents. Troy had signed them himself, listing the origin of the items as personal collection, private inheritance. Claire pointed at it in her office. "That's fraud." Then came the twist. Troy didn't have a receipt. No bill of sale, no record of the transaction with my father. Which meant, legally, he had no proof he ever bought the coins. And if he had no proof of purchase, he had no legal right to sell them. He was cornered. 3 weeks later, his lawyer reached out. Said Troy was open to discussion. Claire told him there'd be no discussion. We wanted the coins returned, every single one still in his possession. And we wanted damages for the rest. That's when Troy threw my dad under the bus. Said my dad told him the coins were his. That it was a verbal inheritance. That he paid him $15,000 in cash over several months under the table to avoid IRS hassle. Claire asked for proof of those payments. There were none. So now we had not only a theft, but 2 men trying to lie their way out of it. We amended the suit to include fraud, conversion, and civil theft. Then Claire did something I hadn't even thought of. She filed a motion to freeze my dad's assets. That got his attention. He called again, this time quieter, but still full of bitterness. You're ruining your own blood. You did that yourself, I said. I was your father. No, I said. Grandpa was. You were just the guy who drove me to school. He went silent. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt. No second thoughts. Just quiet. Claire told me we had a strong case. The only thing that could complicate it was if my dad somehow came up with a fake will or forged document. But given his track record, she wasn't worried. The court date was set, but things weren't done unraveling yet. One of the coins that had been sold, the St. Gaudens, had been purchased by a private collector in Norman. Claire contacted him directly. Showed him the photos, the will, the lawsuit. He was cooperative. I bought it fair and square, he said. But if this turns out to be stolen property, I don't want it in my house. He returned it, free of charge. Just like that, the most valuable piece of the collection was back in my hands. But not all the coins were coming home. And neither was the peace I thought I'd feel. Because while the court battle was heating up, my father was doing something else. Something petty. Something personal. And something I never saw coming. A week after I got the St. Gaudens back, I came home from work and found a notice taped to my front door. Zoning complaint filed, unauthorized commercial activity. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then I read through the fine print. Someone had reported me for allegedly running an unlicensed appraisal business from my house. They claimed I had high-value items being sold and traded on the property and that my basement was being used to store unregulated inventory. It was complete nonsense. But it triggered an inspection. A city inspector showed up the next day with a clipboard and a badge. He asked to look at my basement safe, questioned how many people came to the house each week, and whether I'd recently sold any coins on eBay or out of state. I asked him who filed the complaint. He didn't say, but I already knew. I called Claire, and she sighed before I finished my sentence. Your dad's trying to make you look shady, she said. He wants to drag your name through the mud. Create doubt. Paint you like a wannabe dealer who made this whole thing up for money. It didn't work. The inspector cleared me, apologized, and told me off the record. We get this kind of petty crap during divorces and family estate fights all the time. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 days later, my wife got an anonymous envelope in the mail. No return address. Just our last name and home address on the front, typed in bold block letters. Inside was a printed email exchange between my dad and an old high school friend of mine. It was years old. The email accused me of lying to women, drinking too much in college, and being entitled. Someone had been digging, and someone wanted my wife to question who I was. She didn't fall for it. She handed it to me and said, he's grasping at straws. Still, it rattled me. The man who helped raise me had gone full-blown character assassination. Claire documented it all. That envelope may seem small now, she said, but it's the kind of thing judges remember. Makes him look unhinged. Troy, on the other hand, had gone quiet. Too quiet. We found out why during discovery. Turns out, while we were focused on getting the coins back, Troy had been busy liquidating property. He sold off 2 rental houses and a workshop in Coweta. We assumed he was trying to cash out before the court could hit him with damages. But one of the houses? It had belonged to his mother. And according to property records, she was still alive and still living there. He'd forged her signature to sell the house. Now he had a criminal investigation of his own. That meant 2 things for me. The guy who bought my family's stolen history was likely going to jail. My dad would have fewer places to hide behind. But even with everything unraveling for them, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father wasn't done. And I was right. 2 weeks before the final hearing, someone broke into my house. They didn't take anything. didn't touch the TV, laptops, or even the coin case. They didn't open the safe. They just smashed the glass on my front door, walked into the living room, and left a single thing on the kitchen table. A photo. It was of me and Grandpa, from when I was maybe 8 years old, sitting in his workshop holding that coin case. On the back, someone had written in red ink, "He'd be ashamed of you." That was the moment I stopped treating it like a civil dispute. This wasn't about coins anymore. This was about war. I stood in that kitchen for a long time just staring at the photo. I hadn't seen that picture in years. It had been framed in my grandfather's office, one of his favorites. I never even knew what happened to it after he passed. I figured my dad kept it. Now it was on my table, left like some kind of threat. I called the police. Again. They came, dusted for prints, took the photo into evidence. Said the lock on the front door had been pried with something thin, probably a bump key or a custom tool. Nothing stolen, just the message left behind. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. But the officer looked at me and said something that stuck. "If you want real justice here, you're not gonna get it through us. This is personal. And whoever did this, they want to see you break." I didn't break. I got to work. The next week, I met with Claire and gave her full permission to drag every skeleton out of every closet. Not just my father's, but Troy Becker's too. We filed new motions. We subpoenaed phone records, bank statements, emails. And then Claire got her hands on something big. She found an old email thread between my dad and Troy from before the coin sale. In it, my dad wrote, "My son thinks I'm holding these for him. I'll make up some story later. Just give me the cash under the table and we're good." It was short, careless, sent from his personal Gmail account. But it was enough to show intent. That changed everything. Claire submitted it as evidence the following day. And when we walked into the courtroom 2 weeks later, my father's face was pale. The hearing was open to the public. Not many people came, but 2 faces stood out. My Uncle Martin, my dad's younger brother, and my father's pastor from the church he used to boast about. Both sat in the back. I never invited them. I didn't need to. Word had spread. My dad took the stand. He tried to look pitiful. Talked about raising me, about misunderstandings, about financial stress and confusion over ownership. But when Claire pulled up the email and the judge read it out loud, he dropped his head. Troy didn't even bother defending himself. He pled the fifth more than once. His lawyer looked ready to throw in the towel halfway through the day. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I told the court about Grandpa, the stories, the lessons, the afternoons spent in his workshop. I showed them the will, the photos, the emails my dad had sent me years ago saying the collection was safe and waiting. Then I held up the photo that was left in my kitchen. The one from the break-in. "My grandfather wouldn't be ashamed of me," I said, looking straight at my dad. "He'd be ashamed of you." The judgment came down hard. The court ordered my father to pay $42,000 in damages and legal fees. They froze his retirement account, placed a lien on his house, and seized his bank assets. Every cent he had left went into that judgment. His name was dragged through every legal publication and court record in the county. His pastor left halfway through the judgment being read. My uncle didn't say a word, just looked at him, shook his head, and walked out. As for Troy, he was arrested a month later for the forged property sale involving his mother's house. Fraud, elder abuse, and perjury. Last I heard, he's facing prison time. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Right after the trial, I received a letter from an estate attorney in Muskogee. Apparently, my grandfather had a second safety deposit box. One only the lawyer knew about. He'd written a note to be delivered only if something ever happened with the coins. Inside the box was a final letter handwritten by Grandpa. "If you're reading this, something went wrong. I knew your father had a taste for shortcuts. That's why I set aside the real prize. The collection was only part of your inheritance. There's more." Underneath the letter was a trust document. A quiet portfolio Grandpa had built unrelated to coins. A fund worth over $180,000 held in my name alone. He hadn't told a soul. He wrote, "Your father always wanted the coins. He never thought beyond them. You did." I didn't tell my dad about the money. I didn't need to. He lost everything trying to take what wasn't his. His pride, his home, his reputation. And the only thing he really cared about, control. He's living in a 1-bedroom apartment now. His church turned on him. My uncle won't speak to him. His phone number is blocked on my end. Sometimes I wonder if he lies awake at night replaying every choice. I hope he does. As for me, the coins are in my safe. The fund is untouched for now. And my son, who just turned 9 last week, has already started asking about Grandpa's coin stories. This time, I won't let anyone else hold them for him.